You're tuned in to RX Radio.
We're back.
Hi, friends. It's
RX
me.
Radio. Yeah, with your host,
Yes.
Jordan Shallow.
Like actually though, it's been saying that on the intro for a minute, and I've been MI the fuck A for I don't even know when the last episode you and I did was.
Was it in Miami, beginning of the year?
When I was Brittany in 07?
With
Is
no
that
hair?
it? When I was
It might have been.
skinned like a fucking bald cat? Yeah, Jesus. You know what was nice? People would message me and ask me when I was coming back. And I was like, oh, I forget because we did the podcast for so long before anyone listened that I forget that people listen. And I was like, you guys noticed that I wasn't on there? That's crazy. Good for us, I guess.
Yeah, it's good. We're still here. We're still doing it.
Did we roll over we rolled over an episode milestone recently that I passed?
We're in the 400s right now.
Insanity. Fuck. We should have done what Mexicans dad do and thrown some ridiculous party. What's it? The quinceanera? Have you ever come across one of those?
Oh yeah. All the time.
Fuck, dude. That's next level shit.
Yeah.
I turned 16. You know what I got for my 16th birthday? A job. That's what I got. Jesus, get to work. A trampoline. Fucking bouncy castle. What a life. Some people just peak too early. We all know the girls that peak too early in high school. Just saying.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Anyways, man, how are you? I feel like you know what this was our weekly therapy hour, and now I didn't realize how much I needed it till I hit the red record button.
Yeah. The countdown, everything, the mic with the headset, it really puts you in a good place.
Yeah. It is an odd reality though, that coming back to it after a while and having the realization that people actually listen. It's like, oh, should I rein it in a little bit? And it was a short thought. The answer is no. The answer is, especially in the last 4 months, I think my outlook on everything has gotten more jaded. So
Dude,
buckle up, RX Radio fans. I have something to say about quite literally everything at this point. Oh my God. I was up in Halifax, Nova Scotia for the past 4 or 5 days, kind of going through an NHL preseason camp.
Yeah. And
was a relative newcomer to the group so I was there on the clinical side and on the training side. And I was kind of the only one that cross-pollinated both. And the rest of that team had known each other. They all come in from different parts of really North America. Some come in from Minnesota, and some come in from the Toronto area. One guy comes in from Colorado, and it's cool. But I was a relative outsider, so I was quiet for a day, and then I was like, well, I mean, they're not going to kick me out, right? So some guy asked me a question, and I actually thought it might be a good topic for the podcast because I yelled. There were 7 people around me when I started. Guy asked me the question, and by the time I was done my monologue, there was 3 people left. And then within 5 minutes, I was just standing in a hallway yelling by myself. This is the internet. This is pretty much how, if we could watch our episode drop offs, that's kind of how it goes. And it's the invasion of boomer fitness.
Oh, boomer fitness.
Can't do it, dog. What are we doing? What are we doing with the longevity crowd here? What has happened to people's fire, the grit, they're wanting to achieve something other than not dying? I'm sorry, if your goal is picking up your kids when you're 80, you're fucking soft. That's what it is. It's I really want some of these people, this longevity crowd, I want them to die young. I'd be like, you wasted your fucking time. You wasted your potential, right? That's going to be the eulogy that I read. And it's this fucking fitness boomer podcast. Remember back in the day where we used to give people shit for being abstract warriors? All of a sudden, everyone's back on the research dick again. And it's studies have shown that you can read. That's all studies show. Get the fuck out of here. It's so funny to watch people retrospectively or retroactively discount the validity of studies done in the past. And then when they go to www.imright.com and they find an abstract that fits the way they slant things, then they don't question the validity of it now. It won't get judged by through the telescope of time. And 20 years ago, be wow, right? It drives me nuts from sleep optimization to supplementation. And these guys got fucking pipe cleaner arms. It's like where's like the idea that wellness and health and performance are somehow the same thing? Like before we started the podcast, great segue, fucking crushing it. He's back. You were just complaining about your mid meet prep or closing in on the end of meet prep. You're competing in like 2 weeks to the day, if I'm not mistaken.
2 weeks Saturday, tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. But like, you're in the throes of it, and in going through meet preps myself, like it's not like you feel like you got hit by a bus, and it's not necessarily like a longevity play. It's actually definitely not a longevity play. Like, performance and health are inversely correlated. And if they're not, I'm really questioning what sport you're attempting to perform at, right? Like if there's a sport that performance and health are correlated, it's probably not a very fun sport to watch.
Yeah, I'd say. Yeah, they're in opposition, right? They run parallel for a long period of time, and then you get to a point where they have to deviate. Right, especially any sort of strength sport is, yes, being strong will make you live longer to a point, but then there's going to be a point where it's actually detrimental to your health. Like, I don't know how many years I'm shaving off my life at this very moment, but if I die before this meet, just know that I died happy because I don't have to keep doing this anymore.
And you bring up a really interesting visual. Like, I want people to kind of follow that in their head. Like, anytime I think of a graph, I immediately slap a bell curve on there, right? Because that's kind of how stuff works, right? You have like, a slow rise. The bulk of everything is kind of in the middle, and then you have your outliers on either end. So like, this idea of like health and performance, and this idea that you can have this breakaway, right? This black swan that's healthy and performs well. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe if drugs are involved. That's kind of what drugs do, right? Like, I don't know. Look at Novak Djokovic, right? He's still crushing it into he's in his late 30s now. He's been crushing it for like 20 years. Guy just like lost Wimbledon for the first time in 8 years. But it's like, you have to imagine while every other compatriot next to you is dropping like a fucking fly. Like Andy Murray's got 2 bionic hips. He looks terminal. And yes, I'm using tennis references because I've been on the road with tennis players. But it's like, it's unless you're using drugs. And then even drugs enter in another bell curve of like, oh shit, we have these end-tail distributions. And it's like, if you want to be exceptional at something, you have to be willing to take a certain level of risk. And sometimes that risk is to your health. But like, and I think it really comes down, my axe to grind is with the word performance. Like, you don't know, like these fucking boomers doing kettlebell swings or bear crawls. It's like, you wouldn't know fucking performance if it was standing in front of you because you've never stood in front of it, right? Like, I don't know, like you've been to meets, you competed at the AO, you compete at the highest level in CrossFit. Like, you've literally been on stages with the fittest people on the planet, right? I've been in the same meets as, watching world records fall. I've been in the arena with the, quite recently, the best hockey players in the world, the best football players in the world. And it's like, don't call it, that's our word. That's performance is reserved for the people that are willing to die to be better than other people at something. If you're just like want to pick up your grandkids, and here's the big problem I have is, there's a decent amount of authority, and I'm going to give people listening to the podcast 3 guesses as to like the handful of names I'm talking about, and feel free to DM slide your best guess because your first two guesses don't count.
Yeah, just throwing this out there, but I've just been saying them. I'll wait till like 30 minutes plus in the podcast, and you just slip it in there. Because the homies are listening after 30 minutes.
I just want, what it is? I want a shot at the heavyweight belt. That's what it is. Like, I'm kind of circling a few of these wagons right now, and I just want to, I wanted to put them to task. Like, I'd love to be able to sit across the table and be like, respectfully, what the fuck do you know? Yeah. Right? Because like, and here's why I wanted to bring up the visual of the graph, because there's a principle that I think people inherently know, but don't know it necessarily has a name. And it's called the reversion to the mean, right? Mm-hmm. So the mean is like the average, right? And so in this bell curve, the average of everything, by definition of what the word average means, is that it's kind of right in the middle, right? Now there's like, there's mean and there's mode and there's, what's the third one? Median. Grade median, 7 math number, or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, so here you have people whose goals and aims are in like, they're boomers. They're the bulk of the people. So they're already in the middle of like the demographic. And so if you're under the age of, I don't know, and I don't want to exclude like our badass friends that are in their 40s and 50s, but especially if you're like, I don't know, we're 33. If you're under the age of like 35 or 40 and you're seeking advice and yielding to the recommendations of these boomer fitness podcasts, it's like, dog, this is your time to swing for the fence. Right? Because like at least have a good story to tell when when your doctor's like, yo, dog, like it's either, we're gonna have to amputate. Wait for that. Like deal with that shit when you get there. Like, once you get to 45, 50, and like, if you beat the brakes off it, cool. Like you got a story to tell, but there's so many people that are just pussing out behind the advice of these fucking boomers that haven't lifted anything in their fucking lab, everything heavier than their fucking lab coat for like 20 years. Don't at me with this research bullshit talking on high performance. It's like high performance longevity are not the same thing, right?
Absolutely not.
Like Stu made a shirt, I'm pretty sure, that said die huge, leave a big coffin or something like that.
Yeah, like live fast, be huge. Yeah, something about big coffin. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, there's obviously, it's not necessarily a weight thing or resistance training thing, but like when it comes, like, just I think my real axe to grind is with performance, and I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast probably dabble in multidisciplinary across podcasts and definitely get like a varied opinion. God, don't get your only opinion from this show, at least now that I'm back. But like, think critically about the person giving you the advice. Right. Because, it might all be true, but true in the context of the arena they built around the body of evidence that they're disseminating. Right. And it's really like, I've seen people, very smart people, kind of be fooled by their definition of performance and their prescriptions towards performance. And they have, sort of relayed some of these prescriptions on to people like professional athletes or even themselves who are above average, athletes, weightlifters, probably in like the top percentile of, muscle mass, next to total body mass, like strength, everything. And all of a sudden what you see, well, maybe not all of a sudden, but over time, you see a reversion to the mean principle. It's like you see them start to detrain and start to become less robust or less anti-fragile, and they start to land right in the center where the throne of these boomer fitness podcasts. That's where these relative asshats are just sitting on top, espousing their middle-aged nonsense. It's like, fuck, man, like. People don't realize like how fast time goes. And I'm going to be this old man who just yells at the cloud here for a second longer. But it's like, 33, I know when, I just know like already the dents in the fender that I have, but I'm still waking up every morning, like going in to take shots. Like I'm still going to like redline it. Like I literally got blood labs the other day, and we're going to talk about a really exciting sponsor. That's a plug upcoming. Yep. Stay tuned. I got blood labs done the other day by a new sponsor of the podcast. And for those of you who know, we don't take sponsors barely ever. So we're really excited about this one. And I got the results back, and like your boy's solid. Thanks for asking.
Go. Yeah.
Well, like exactly. Let's go. I literally thought to myself, because the first thing, all right, so I'm going to ask you a question, knowing me and knowing the friends that we have and sort of like the
I'm going to try not to incriminate anyone.
Us. You get blood labs. Who's the first person you're setting up to?
Oh, Mac, for sure.
right. And like one of the first things he said to me, I'll see if I can even pull it up, because I didn't even open the report yet. I just flipped it to him. No context, no nothing. 7 a.m. in Australia. Not even like a how you doing. Yeah. But he was just like, because Mac is like team dad, but he's team cool dad that buys all the alcohol. Like that's Macintosh. He's like, yeah, look, I'm gonna let you smoke dope, just don't tell your parents.
Yeah.
And so Mac literally said, like, and it's a comprehensive blood panel, and maybe we'll go over it on a show one day, just to kind of take a look, because I've been curious, man. I haven't done my bloods in a while, and you and I have some peripheral experience. Either managing our own or taking a look at it in school. Like we're fairly well versed in like the biochemical pathways, hematology, and normal ranges of like the high level shit. And been trying to, as best I can, kill myself with my schedule for like 5 years. It's been attempting to just die on a plane is really what I've been after. So like seeing the blood results, and I was like, oh, I can dig a little more, because it's like everything is kind of like normal in range and to be expected. And Matt kind of concurred, and his first reaction was like, all right, guess it's time to work harder. Right? Not like, oh, this is the high end of normal. We're going to have to bring your HDL. And it's like, dog, that ain't it, man. That ain't it. Right? Like, people love majoring in the minor. And what you do when you get with that is minor results. And I just really think there's this pervasive industry. And it's like, it's so authoritative. Like, I'm very anti-authority. And not like, fuck you, mom. Like, I love my mom. Unless she's telling me to do some dumb shit, and then, sorry, mom, I'm not doing it. But like the fitness industry seems to be right now in a pendulum swing between like the influencer and the adult, where it's like, we may have been led astray by, people putting whatever anabolics and protein powder and then selling it with promo codes with chicks with their ass hanging out. But it's like the pendulum has swung so aggressively back to the parental supervision. And everyone's kind of just towing the company line in single file, going like, oh, okay, like, sunlight on my balls, or like look into the moon for melatonin. Like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? Like, do something. It's really, it's almost like the fitness industry has been given a bedtime. Figuratively and literally a bedtime by these, like, this upper echelon, podcast cult of pseudo fitness academics who like don't even have a bicep vein. Like, what the fuck, guys? Like, I leave for 4 months, 4 months, and you turn it over to the fucking old people. Unbelievable.
Oh man, yeah. I have a lot of distrust to the fitness industry, let's see, the social media fitness industry on the whole. I know there's a lot of good people out there doing a lot of good that probably don't even have an Instagram account. But I think being in the space that we're in, I have a little bit different take on this. And if you look through the bullshit, everyone's just trying to make money, right? I think that's what this all comes down to. And who has money in the fitness industry? It's not the fucking teenagers pumping out promo codes and then buying protein powder with their parents' money. It's the fucking boomers, right? It's the people that have worked their whole life. And, I see it a lot of times here in the Silicon Valley, especially, is that these people, they spend their whole life focused on their career, focused on work, and they get to this place where they're like maybe in their late 40s, 50s, and they're like, well, I've got all this fucking money, but I'm probably going to die soon because I haven't taken care of myself my entire life. I think that's what this pushes towards. And like you said, there's two sides of it. There's the boomers, and then there's the influencers. And the influencers is absolutely like a volume play. It's like, I have a couple million on TikTok. I do whatever, like make $9.99 off a program or a promo code from protein. And it's like this, they come up quick, they go away quick. And then there's the boomers who they find fitness and they find this person that, it's kind of like you said, the reversion to the mean, but like these people are far on the other side of the bell curve, right? Like they've never understood what it's like to be strong or be fit or, have any sort of physical capability in their life. And then they figure out a way to get there, to just kind of work a little bit closer towards the hump on that bell curve. And that's everything to them, right? Is that it makes a significant change in their life. And they think that, they're not exposed to this shit. They're probably not on Instagram or TikTok. Maybe they found a podcast or whatever, a blog. I think, do old people read blogs? I don't fucking know.
I think so. Vlogs now.
Vlog, yeah. It's on Facebook is what it is. That's
right.
If it's on Facebook, then it's boomer fitness for sure. But I think there's this crowd of people that, they find whatever it is they find, and then that's it. And I see it all the fucking time with CrossFit. And like, I've been in that world and I've like been sucked into CrossFit and I was all about it for a while. But now that I'm on the other side of it, I see all the faults in it. Right. And I think the reason I can do that is because of my experience in the industry, my knowledge about the human body, understanding around exercise principles, things like that, is that, actually the reason why this workout is shit is X, Y, and Z. And I can list off literally everything that's wrong with a workout or a week of programming. But to them, it's just a way. Is they found a way to feel better, feel stronger, and they get hooked on it. And that's the money play there. Is that if you can capture someone, you can give them a way to become more capable, become more focused, even if it's more gimmicky or people like exploiting research or exploiting titles. How often do we see that shit in our industry? Is that, Dr. So-and-so says this, or like Dr. Oz, like shit like that. People on talk shows, it's like, okay, this person with an ounce of credibility said this thing. I did it. I felt better. And now this is where I'm going to invest my time and my money because I have time and money because I'm 50 years old and I have time and money. So that's kind of the way that I look at that side of fitness.
It blows my mind that because everyone has their domain of expertise in their life, and they don't think of the way they examine, evaluate, assess their domain of expertise, something that they might be better at or likely get paid to be better at than someone else. And they don't seem to, at mass or at scale, seem to be able to extrapolate out the way that they would find, like, pick out bullshit in their domain of expertise and cross apply these red flags. Because, like, to me, there's a quote. I think it's from the James Bond movie Spectre. It's one of my favorite. I fucking love James Bond movies. Like, I'm not much of like a TV guy, or I'm a big movie guy, but mostly on planes. But there's a scene where, like, they're meeting the guy that gives them all the gadgets, and I think they're meeting at like the Victoria and Albert Museum, I think is where it is in London. And he sits down and they're looking at paintings, and he sits next to him. Bond is old, and that's kind of the gimmick of this whole movie. And he kind of looks at him and he goes, Jesus, like, you still have spots, like, you're too young. And so it's kind of this, like, just little dichotomous interaction of, like, the old Bond on his way out, grizzly, wily veteran, and this young up and coming tech guy. And there's an exchange, and it's like very done in this kind of classic British, really fast wit. And he goes, youth is no sign of innovation. And he looks at him and goes, well, age is no sign of experience. And I was like, ooh, I mean, obviously it was scripted, but, like, I really like the essence of that, right? Because, I do feel like the fitness boomer podcast advisory board that's being formed in the social square or social media square is really just from, like, an actual experience level at the level of application. It's really fifth graders teaching fourth graders. Yeah. And I sit back, I don't know, 15 years their junior, being like, I have way more experience than all of you. Yeah. Like, not to put too fine a point on it, but also go fist yourself, right? Like, put me in the room, you know what I mean? Like, I know I've had this conversation with people who, work in either a similar industry as us or, in completely opposite, in real estate, in, I don't know, if finance, investing. It's like, we do asset management. It's like, okay, would you have been able to kind of see, like, can you spot, like, a Ponzi scheme? It's like, oh yeah, there's markers, there's indicators. It's like, right, okay, well, like, what are those at their core? Can you not see and extrapolate and cross apply the relationship of people to this information in the same way that you would in your domain of excellence? And it's just like trying to get that light to switch and that lateral thinking to turn on. Fitness has, like, this weird, this protective layering over it for the public to not be able to spot bullshit. Yeah. Right. Like, every other the general public, I think, is maybe just not better. And maybe the word is just not as bad as spotting bullshit. Cause, like, obviously it probably stems down to, like, misinformation, air quote misinformation, or bad information, or poorly incentivized information. I think that's probably the best way to look at it. Like, there's no bad ideas, just bad incentives. I think that's like a Sam Harris quote that I really like. And it's really, like, almost disheartening to be like, wow, like, you're a pretty smart person, but you're asking me about, insert novel bullshit, small pebble to turn over fitness trend of the week because it was talked about by, a buddy, what's his bucket, who's, like, in his 50s in a research lab. It's like, come on, use your fucking head, man. Yes. And, like, turning that light on. And the reason the light stays off is because the answer is always hard work. Yeah. That's always where it comes down to. It's like, that's why it's, people who just be like, hey, give yourself 10 years, try and bury yourself under the bar every single day to what degree you can tolerate. Eat like less like an asshole more often than not. Drink probably never.
Yeah.
Smoke definitely not.
Yeah.
And and then come talk to me in 10 years, which is like, it's so cliched to go down that road, but it is like, I think it's a bit of a time for like a wake up call for people, because like it just like the declining state of the average fitness level because of like the need for kids our age to want to sound smart, and kids our age and younger to differentiate themselves from the influencer crowd, which like, hey, fucking do that because they're retarded. But you don't have to secede territory and bow down and kiss the ring of these old fucks who've never done shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I like the idea of lateral thinking and how that can apply, like lateral application, especially to the fitness industry. Because there's a handful of names that I could think of off the top of my head. Just picking from the level 1 crew, like one that just came through. He actually goes to my gym and he did CrossFit. He may not anymore because of the same reasons that that I was just mentioning. But Alan Kensworthy. And then there's another one we met in Australia, Michael Liu, that just the skill of critical thinking and applying logic and reasoning to the things that you're doing. If you can do that, and it doesn't, you said like cut your teeth for 10 years. Yeah, fucking do that. But if you can laterally apply that, it doesn't have to be in the fitness industry for you to be able to laterally apply those skills to your fitness and your performance. Because if it's someone like Alan's a sound engineer at Apple, he's a very smart, very critical, deep thinker. And Michael Liu, who's in accounting, right? Some shit like that. Like some
big
very
finance guy.
Yeah, big finance guy. Drives a cool car. Fuck yeah.
Sick.
Yeah. So if you can take that skill and refine that skill, that's what it comes down to. Because that's what we're in the business of is teaching critical thinking or lateral application of concepts, or understanding how principles kind of guide the thinking or the thought process around what we're doing. And that stuff applies to everything. There's so many things that if you can think about exercise this way, or insert thing here, if you can think about finances this way, you can apply those same concepts to exercise. Vice versa. Is that reversion to mean? If I stop making money, if I don't have cash flow, I'm going to go back to zero in my bank account because I still have expenses that I need to pay for. Same sort of thing in the gym is that if I stop training, I'm going to go back to weak as shit because I still have physical tasks that I have to do, and I'm not having any sort of adaptation that's going to pull me towards being more capable of those. So I really like the idea of lateral application and thought process that allows you to apply principles to whatever it is that you're doing. And that's the reason that, people that can think this way about exercise, they're outliers. They're on that far side of the bell curve on a lot of the things that they do because they can cross apply those concepts and they can drive cooler cars because of that. Shout out John Bond.
Shout out John Bond. Jesus. He bought a truck while he was out here?
I saw that, dude. So sick.
Yeah, he's like, literally one day we were driving to Jimmy's bitching about like, he's got to talk to his accountant about like all the cars that he's had. And then the next day he like buys a truck and ships across country. I think once you get to the peak of a bell curve and you start to go further right on the graph, like the shift of evidence. So like, let's maybe start with defining evidence, because research and evidence have been probably the two most conflated words
Right.
in fitness in the last couple of years, especially at least in my little window of the internet, what I've been seeing most. And so research, patient values, client values, athlete values, whatever that is, preferences, their experience, and then your experience as a professional in whatever discipline that you practice. And as you get to the, you've ascended the bell curve to the peak. You are the most extra medium average person that exists. And now you're starting the downslope, right? You're moving to the right of the graph, and you're trying to be a physical outlier in some way, shape, or form, right? Greater endurance, greater strength, greater skill in a particular endeavor, sport, task, what have you. You got to realize like that three-headed monster of evidence, you need to have somewhat of a shepherd there. The experience one really, because there are principles that, devoid of where you learn them, whether it's under a bar, or whether it's in a library, whether it's on a track, or whether it's in the military in a foxhole, like those things, almost the intangibles, right, that oftentimes get cited in outliers and high performers, but I think they are actually quite tangible. The only reason they get deemed as this nebulous intangible is because that they're not quantifiable. But look, the outcomes that we see, and the idea that these successful people leave clues, it's like you can quantify it, usually by like either gold medals or world records or commas in a bank account. But it's like we get there by qualitative means. Like nothing has pushed me further right. And I don't know where I land. I just know that every day I try and work myself more or less to death. And based off my blood work, I've done a terrible job to it, but I have some pretty cool stories. Based off of my attempts every day, the thing that I learn the most that pushes me further right of the curve, or at least that's my trajectory every day, is the stories that I hear from the people who are successful. It's not the data, because you can't research these people, because research almost by their nature is going to revert to the mean. And it's like, sorry, man, like, and I'm not like an anti-mediocrity. It's like, I'm trying to live this thing like it's life or death. Like that's what I want. And if I don't do that, then I get like a weird thing in my brain, and then I don't sleep for more than 4 hours for like a decade. So you got to think like, slanting that evidence away, and not necessarily away, but really trying to push the needle of your own experience and be around those people that have done what you've done. It's not intangible. It's so well documented throughout the course of time. It's pretty much a sure shot, right? Yeah. There's 1,000 ways to get from, the 30 pounds overweight to 10 pounds overweight to, at ideal body weight to 6-pack abs. Like, yeah, you can skin that cat 1,000 ways, but like, there's really clear straight line paths to high performance and success in whatever endeavor that you choose. And a lot of them you just have to accept are qualitative, and that information relays through story and through experience and through sharing that experience, and not sharing a post about the latest new study finds. New study finds. Shut the fuck up, man. Jesus, what have you done lately? Go fuck your hand.
Yeah, definitely fuck your hand. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And the way that I think about this is that research is born out of bias inherently, right? Is I have this bias or this understanding of a situation. How can I prove it? And that's when they go down the route to prove this thing. Like if Coca-Cola wants to prove that Coca-Cola doesn't give you diabetes, they're going to fucking prove that. They're going to find a way to manipulate a study to make that happen. So there's already this pre-existing bias that shapes the information that they want to find, or shapes the story that they want to tell, versus, like you're saying, experience. It's qualitative. It's what have I seen? What have I observed by doing the thing for this period of time, that now I know that this is the process that works the best because this is what's gotten the best results. So it's starting from point A and getting to point B, as opposed to starting from point B and saying, all right, how can I find a point A that allows me to prove point B?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I think is true of all the people who have experienced success, and I'll use that word very deliberately, and again, success can be in whatever, because if you laterally apply the concepts, you can use them to do literally whatever, is like there's an awareness that comes down to it, right? There's a self-awareness.
Yes.
And the thing is, like, these people are usually crippled by that self-awareness to like even attempt to give advice. Like, a lot of people who are super successful, you go to them and they're like, oh man, like I'm not the right person to ask. It's like, really? You retired at 28. Are you, I think you're the right person to ask, dog. Like, or like, really? Like you bench like a bajillion pounds. Like you sound like you're probably the exact person to ask. But I think the problem is when people are on the down slope, and I can speak to this in my own experience because I've gotten a lot more out of asking better questions in these situations, and here's a thought, not saying anything. I get so much more out of saying so much less now. And I just observe, like, and I just sit and I just get, I get in a room with some like pretty wild people, and like I say way less, but I get so much more out of it because it's like, I think different senses are going to help you at different stages of learning. And I think your eyes are probably going to be the thing that is going to push you furthest right of that bell curve distribution and make you this long end tail outlier. Like, and the eye kind of physically, like, yeah, have your eyes open, but like metaphorically or metaphysically, like the idea that an eye would be something that you like pay attention. Like that's how you pay attention. Like you can't pay attention with your nose. You can't pay attention with your fingers. You pay attention with your eyes. You watch how people act and interact, and you recognize patterns both consciously and subconsciously. Where it's like, if I'm learning how to do something in the early stages, it's like, yeah, like, even with exercise, it's like I know what I know about exercise, or I knew what I knew about exercise to a certain point from a tactile experience. Like I had shit in my hands for 18 years and can still continue to do that every day. And there was an emphasis on that. Like I really like, and I was thinking about this the other day, like cue what you can feel, but then cue what you can sense. Right. So like cue what you can feel would be for something like, I always throw out the sensory homunculus, and now we're getting deep into the shit that people usually turn the podcast episode off. But whenever I have like a big rant on the training with cuffs thing, and I was like, hey man, your brain really likes the shit that goes on in your hands. Here's like a picture. Here's a pictorial, like, or a diagram that represents the brain real estate that we assign to the sensory and motor homunculus. And like, take a look at these hubs that our bodies pays a lot of attention to. So like, I'll watch people like cue shoulders in novice people, and I look at the sensory homunculus, and I'm like, we don't designate a ton of sensory input real estate to the shoulder. Cue the hand. If I'm trying to cue rotation, it's thumb web or pinky finger. Like it's somewhere in there. If I need the shoulder to move, because it's what they can feel. Then over time, when they can associate that feeling, if they're paying attention, then you take that feeling and then you start to tie in the other senses, and then you cue what they can sense. And then that's where paying attention starts to really, really pay back, to kind of turn a phrase. But then I think the biggest thing that people need to do is like, just watch, just observe, like eyes open, to get your fucking phone out of your pocket and just sit there and observe, because you don't know what you learn until you go to apply it. Like I think like instinct is something that again is kind of exists in the realm of the subjective, but is so objective in its consistency. Like, oh, this guy's like got really good instincts. Like, and we see this in clinical practice, right? Like, I was with a clinician last week who'd watched a hit on one of the players years ago in the NHL. It was a player that he'd worked with, and they x-rayed his bad hit, not like malicious, but just went into the boards bad. I think guy may have lost consciousness. And this guy has seen thousands of hockey games, this clinician, and has treated, hundreds, if not thousands of professional hockey players. And the player texted him after the game and was like, kind of going back and forth. It was like, what was the diagnosis? What the x-ray say? And the guy was like, x-ray said like stable fracture. And I don't want to go give away too many details, and then he goes, I want you to go get a CT scan. And the CT scan revealed that it wasn't a stable fracture, right? That there was actually a break on the other side, which in a cervical vertebrae is a big problem. Yeah. But he got there through paying attention over time. But sometimes it's not even what you think you're paying attention to. He didn't really know why he didn't feel okay with the diagnosis. He just said, but that I tell you why he knew why is because he had his eyes open for 20 years, and you're taking in information, even though you might not be taking notes, even though you might not be charting it and plotting it on a graph and, assigning p-values and confidence intervals and doing your own research as set by the parameters of, peer-reviewed medical journals and PubMed and all that shit. But like your body is taking note of that, right? It's recognizing patterns, and it's like, our brains are not simple. Look at it, like AI was like kind of big for a bit, and ChatGPT was like kind of blew up for a bit. People are like, oh no, who's going to write my blog posts? And then it's just kind of like, I don't know what to say. It's like not going to make a comeback, and we're not all fucked. Like ATMs aren't going to take over the world or whatever, but we really don't know what goes on. And there's really no telling what could come of keeping your eyes open for a really long time and observing like your craft and your trade, right? Like I see personal trainers all the time. They train their clients and then they leave. Personal trainers that don't train. People always ask me like, oh, and like this actually, like people actually ask me this, not like people always ask me, how many client coaching spots do you have left? And I say 2. It's like, no, like I do get this question a lot because of my position in the industry. People will ask like, well, does it matter if my like trainer coach doesn't work out? And it's like, yes, it fucking matters. Are you joking me? That is the dumbest debate of all time. Of all time. It blows my mind because it immediately takes all of the subliminal pattern recognition that our brain does for us and just go, that doesn't matter. It's like, what? Well, so-and-so never play. Okay. All right. That's fine. Yes. There's outliers, but oh my God, if the product you're selling is trust around exercise prescription and nutrition, and God forbid if you're further along, or I would say further along, but a different field that has a more medical slant, right? Like chiropractic, physical therapy, and then into the medical doctor, surgeon, so on up the invasive ladder. It's like, yeah, it matters so much because there's so much data that we're consciously blind to. But if our eyes are open and we're paying attention and we're present, we are collecting so much information. And the fact that this still gets batted back and forth, well, that doesn't really matter. You can get like an educate. No, because you're just discounting like the rest of the brain that's doing all the fucking work.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm going to lose weight being back on the podcast.
I know. I can tell it's stressful for you.
Fuck, it sucks.
Yeah, I completely agree though. And experience is the thing that allows you to cut through the noise. Like if you think of what does an assessment look like for you right now versus what does an assessment look like for you a decade ago. Like you have a decade of experience that, maybe now it's just watching someone move, and just from seeing someone literally walk in the gym or go through a set of walking lunges, you can identify 3 things that are probably spot on that that they need to work on, that may be limiting factors to them in terms of performance down the line, or it could be contributing to an injury, or it could be a compensation from a prior injury. You can draw all this information just by watching someone, as opposed to maybe a decade ago, you'd have them on the table and you looked at internal versus external rotation of the hip versus, how strong are your quads versus your hamstrings and all this shit that you don't really need to know. It's just noise. But by getting those reps in, by observation, by doing the thing, understanding this is what it feels like when I'm externally rotated and I go through gait cycle. This is how the foot strikes the ground. And that's how that's going to contribute, and layered on top of these principles that you've defined around biomechanics, exercise principles, that's what's going to allow you to cut through the noise. So you're missing a huge part of that if you can't experiment on yourself. That's such an internalized process, and everything that I can claim that I know, the things that I know are things that I've experienced myself, right? It's not theory. It's not something I've read in a book. It's something that I've gone on the gym floor and I've done. And I could tell you with pretty close to 100% confidence that this is why this happens. And if we do this, this is going to be an appropriate intervention. It's because I've done it myself. I've felt it. I've had that sensation. I've gotten that feedback. And I know that it's going to work for this person because it's worked for 100 people before that person. And that's something that if you don't have that application, if you've never done the thing, it's observation informs action. We need to do the thing to see what works and what doesn't work. We need to do it wrong so that we can do it right. And after we do it right and we can recreate that time after time again with another person, with ourselves, then we start to internalize this process. And it's like, oh, like I can skip every step in between. I can go from watching this person walk to conclusion very quickly. I can draw that line. But if you've never done that, you've never taken yourself through that process, how am I supposed to trust that you can do that with any sort of accuracy just because of theory? It's like, take that and apply it to another profession. Like, would you trust a brain surgeon that's never done surgery, but they've read all the books? Probably fucking not.
Yeah, and I think we got to Pat Davidson made a really good point when we did a seminar a few years ago. Like, this is kind of like a trade. Like, it's a unique career in and everything. And I think you put up a post the other day about the idea of practice and what practice actually means. Like, to be in clinical practice means you're practicing. Just like the hockey players this week would go out and practice and they would do drills. It's like you have to treat it as such, right? Like you have to use that feedback loop to have your inputs change your outputs. And I think when research, like one of the reasons research kind of drops the ball in this, because like these research things are not necessarily principles based, and they're usually in such sterile an environment that you scrape any ability to infer or extract experience from it, right? Like things are happening to people in research, they're not experiencing them, and that's going to be a completely different set of environmental standards than the real world, right? Like people are experiencing things in relation with the myriad of other shit they have going on in their life outside of the gym or outside of their nutrition. Where research by very nature, kind of as you mentioned, like it has to control that experience, and you're left with something that you can't use instinctually, right? You just have to use theoretically, but all your clients exist in this this melting pot of experience, and you're trying to whitewash the entire thing and just apply this thing that's sort of just grown of a petri dish inside of a silo, where your client or yourself is like, it's very multifaceted, and the systems are constantly interacting and talking to each other, and it just becomes, I don't want to say inapplicable, but I think there's a point, kind of like maybe to kind of double back to a point earlier, is like once you've kind of hit a average and you're starting to be more above average, it's like you need to be careful of that whitewashing of the experience and dictating your decision off of evidence primarily, or even how much evidence informs, and really start to look at high performers in your space and listen to their stories and watch them do the thing that you're trying to get better at or achieve. Because that's where I think, it's really easy to kind of rattle off the 3 pillars of evidence as we did before, right? Like, client patient values, clinical experience or professional experience, and then obviously best practice research. But I don't think many people talk about the when in that little equation, right? Like, when do we weight these things heavier? It's like, well, when we're in the middle of fucking nowhere and someone's been here before, that's where I'm going to ask for directions, right? Like, hey, where did you go from here? And again, like you said, it can be a lateral thought of like, hey, when you reach a level in your business where you're now in a Forbes 500, right? Like, where was your first, what was your first strategic hire? How did you invest? How did you raise capital, right? Or like, hey, when you were going to Olympic trials, what was your training like, right? Or hey, you're going to Olympic trials, like, can I sort of watch what works for you? Because that's the Forbes 500 of athletics, right? You're not going to go to some fucking school teacher, right, and ask for your how do you cook your books when your company's like, making X amount overseas, and where do you set up you're set up in Ireland from, because you're Apple and you want to pay as little tax as possible, and your headquarters is like in the middle of fucking nowhere, Ireland. It's like, you're probably not going to get that from like a macroeconomics textbook. You're going to get that from someone going like, yo, psst, I got a secret, right? And it's, and it's not necessarily like bro science per se, because I don't want it to be so easily dismissed as that. But it's like, I think it really comes down to people like, as you ascend through, like really need to appraise the efficacy of the information. And a good place to start is appraise the talking head that's just espousing it, because are they just, I know how to read. If I was interested in the academic side of things, I know how to, I have subscriptions to medical journals, I can access them. But if I really want to perform, and I know what that word means, and I know what high performance is, because I've seen it and I've strived for it and I work around it, and I strive to continue to work around it and be a part of that conversation in some way or in every way. If you really know what performance means, I'm looking for the stories, I'm looking for the experience, I'm looking for the immersion, I'm looking for the story. I'm not looking for the fucking research paper.
Yeah, that's really true. I think something to note with all this too is that we're not going to find anything new on research at this point, right? It's going to confirm things that we probably already knew, or it's going to identify trends that have probably been happening for a long period of time. So if you have a sample size of clients, or if your experience dictates that you've worked with enough people that are trying to accomplish similar goals, you're going to see those trends for yourself. And your experience is going to dictate what will probably be proved at some point 10 years from now in research, is that outliers are going to outlie. I don't know. They're, the highest performers, they're just different, is the most simple way to put it. Is that people like, there's one Steph Curry, there's one Michael Jordan, there's one LeBron James. Like, these people are outliers in every single way. So you can't necessarily apply the things that made them a success to other people. They have their height, their weight, their parents, their upbringing, their experiences. Yeah, that's the stuff that led them to be the best in the world at what they do. But there's probably some guy that you've never heard of that's playing basketball that took himself from maybe somewhere around the hump of that bell curve, that maybe made the league for a year or two, but he did everything within his power the right way to get him there, right? And I don't know basketball well enough to know that name, but there's going to be these things that are going to make significant differences in people's performance, that they're not going to be consistent with the best performers, because the best performers were going to be the best performance regardless of what happened, right? They were just genetically predisposed to be what they are. So I think there's training principles, and if you're in that realm for long enough, you're going to identify the things that work. And the things that have worked for decades are going to continue to work, and that's going to be your 98%. And there might be these 2% of things that are maybe newer technologies, maybe it's newer drugs, things like that, that are going to have a large influence on people's abilities to perform, and that are going to take human performance to the next level. But the 98% is not going to change. It's pretty well established, and the things that work are the things that work. Like, if you're not sleeping, then you're not going to be performing at your best, period. Like, sleep more, sleep better. Okay, that's important. We know that. Like, you need to be training. You need to understand the things that are going to allow you to adapt and recover. That's proven. That's never going to change as long as we're humans, and the principles of being a human that dictate the way that we adapt are going to be the same. So research isn't going to unveil anything that we don't already know from application.
Yeah, and research will never be, the mean in research is always going to be lower than in application, because you're never testing the top performers.
Yeah.
I've never once seen a study, right? Like, here I'm getting the average of the average college trained male. It's like, motherfucker, I've been training for 18 years.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm not, and I know what you mean when you mean like average college age, well-trained male too. It's like, it's chest bro doing like, calves and biceps like twice a week. It's like, I'm not here for that. So it's like, just as it's almost like the principle of, examining the people behind the lesson you're trying to learn. It manifests itself at every level of extraction, right? Who's doing the research? Bunch of middle-aged dudes with white coats who've never lifted, who've never benched their body weight. Like, okay, all right. And who are they doing the research on? Oh, a bunch of fucking, kids at some school with a half decent kin program. Okay. And who are they? Oh, they're fucking 18-year-old retarded kids in the first year of kinesiology. Sorry if you're in kinesiology in your first year, but if you don't think, like I was that, and I know I was retarded. Why? Because I've been getting smarter for like over half my life since I started my undergrad. And if you're 18 years past when you started your undergrad and you didn't think you were retarded, guess what? You're still retarded. So it's like, like, and then immediately I'm two standard deviations away from where I would like to be to apply any of the outcomes to me, because it's like, I want to know how the outliers skew the mean. And without those outliers, it's like, is a supplement, is sunshine up my asshole at fucking, the crack, like, is any of that, who are you studying this on? People, I like, it always comes down to the person. It comes down to awareness. It comes down to experience. It comes down to experiencing things for yourself, and being self-aware as you do that, listening and being around and keeping your fucking eyes open around people who are better than you at shit, and being aware enough to know when you're in the company of that. And if you do that, at the very least, it'll help put the boomer fitness stuff in perspective, because there will be a time when you and I are old, and I will probably have something amputated off my body. And I will sit there and I will yell warnings about, hey, maybe don't do all the stuff I yelled about 10 years ago. But if you want to have a cool story to tell, and if you want to be someone that people come to be like, hey, like, what did you do? And you want to be, interesting enough. And I'm not saying like, I don't want to be famous. Don't be a douchebag, but like, be someone who ignored the reversion to the mean and actually set out to do something that other people didn't do before, or very few have done. You will not get there by being dragged down by the below average of the kind of the current state of affairs in the fitness industry. Like, fuck, pay attention to like what's coming through your windscreen. Like, all of this shit right now is it's fucking distraction. And it's just the adults like fucking telling you to go to your room. It's like, you got to stay up and work, fucking stay up and work, dog. Like, you gotta wake up early and work, wake up early and work. You got to wake up early and train, wake up early. If you didn't get a meal in, that's like, it's okay. Cause it's just like, I find there's a mental fragility. There's a mental like hypochondriac that comes with like the boomer optimization market, really. Because it, as you mentioned, like, follow the money. It is a market that's nerfing people who are like in their fucking prime. Like some 28-year-old kid talking to me about some supplements, like, dog, caffeine, nicotine, creatine, calories, protein, and just bend tin, dog. Like, you're fucking 28 years old. Like, what are you thinking? Don't spend your money on, it's from the Amazon. It's like, you're not. You're from Toledo. Like, what the fuck are you taking a supplement from the Amazon? Like, get your fucking ass in the gym, you corn-fed motherfucker. Like, you know what? Then that time will come, and we will not go quietly or gently into that good night, and we'll still be yelling with my amputated whatever gets cut off, and we'll still be yelling like, go ham into the grave. And then you maybe find yourself a different podcast if you don't too want to go ham in the grave. If you want to play with your fucking grandkids, and it's like, I don't really like kids, so like, great. Oh, my back hurts. Sorry, kids, fuck off. Like, that's what I'm aiming for. Sorry, Grandpa's busy right now. Go get him his magic pills. It's I don't know. Like, I always try and bring these full circle, and maybe that's like an age thing, but I do like really. I really warn against the reversion to the mean, the subversion to authority, and like the mentally and physically nerfing yourself for the pursuit of wellness, optimization, and longevity as he goes dark.
He's gone. Yeah.
We're all right. I'm with you in spirit.
Thanks, man. Oh, he's back. Yeah, I think the last thing I have to say on this is that you've never known performance if you've never flown too close to the sun. It's like, if you haven't fucked it, then you've never tried hard enough.
I mean, we call that in our industry a closer. Ladies and gentlemen, nice to be back. RX Radio episode 4. We're in the 400s. It has a 4 in it, and you know what? We're just excited to be here. Hey, it's nice to be back. Apologies, but not really. This is our podcast. We can yell about what we want. That being said, I plan on being a permanent fixture if you guys will let me back in. Should be setting up back in Toronto in the next couple of weeks. So you'll see me back on the podcast soon. I don't know. What do we do here? We're going to have a sponsor that I want you guys to check out in a few weeks. We're going to get that organized and get that over to you. I kind of alluded to what that is. I don't know. Share with your friends. If your friends also hate boomer podcasts that talk about being weak and old, but just alive enough to play with little children, like, well, you send them our way. Appreciate the love. And we'll see you next episode.
All right. Thanks for tuning in.